The American automotive landscape is littered with the ghosts of once mighty manufacturing plants that built millions of cars before falling silent forever. Today I'm exploring the shocking stories behind abandoned car factories across the United States. From Detroit's crumbling giants to forgotten plants in small towns. These ruins tell the story of American industrial decline and the human cost of changing economics. Ford Rouge Plant Complex, Dearborn, Michigan. Starting with perhaps the most famous abandoned section of American automotive history, the original Ford Rouge plant represents both the peak of American industrial might and its dramatic decline. While parts of the complex remain active, vast sections sit abandoned after decades of downsizing from Henry Ford's original vision. Built in the 1920s, the Rouge was Ford's attempt to create a completely self-sufficient manufacturing complex. The facility featured its own steel mill, glass plant, power generation, and even a tire factory. At its peak, Rouge employed over 100,000 workers and could transform raw materials into finished automobiles entirely on site. This was vertical integration taken to an almost absurd extreme. What makes the abandoned section so shocking is the scale of what remains. Massive foundry buildings sit empty with equipment still in place, their windows broken and roofs collapsing. The old steel mill sections are particularly haunting. Enormous blast furnaces and rolling mills that once produced steel for millions of Ford vehicles now rust in silence. Nature is slowly reclaiming these industrial cathedrals, with trees growing through factory floors and wildlife making homes in abandoned offices. The human cost is staggering. Rouge once employed entire neighborhoods, providing middle-class wages for generations of families. The abandoned sections represent not just empty buildings but lost communities and broken dreams. Walking through these ruins, you can still see personal items left behind, worker lockers, safety notices, and time clocks frozen at the moment production stopped forever. Packard Automotive Plant, Detroit, Michigan. The Packard plant on Detroit's east side represents one of the most dramatic examples of automotive abandonment in America. Once home to one of the world's most prestigious luxury car manufacturers, the massive complex now stands as a monument to industrial decay and urban decline. Packard built this facility in 1903 as the most advanced automotive manufacturing plant in the world. The reinforced concrete construction was revolutionary for its time, allowing for massive open floor spaces and sophisticated assembly line operations. During its heyday, the plant produced some of America's finest automobiles, competing directly with Cadillac and Lincoln for luxury car supremacy. What makes the Packard ruin so shocking is how completely nature has reclaimed the facility. Trees grow through factory floors, creating an almost post-apocalyptic landscape, where industrial machinery rusts alongside flourishing vegetation. The administration building, once an elegant symbol of corporate success, now stands gutted with its windows blown out and interior completely destroyed by decades of weather and vandalism. The abandonment story is particularly tragic. Packard struggled after World War II, unable to compete with larger manufacturers who could achieve better economies of scale. Production moved to smaller facilities before ending entirely in 1958. The massive plant sat mostly empty for decades, becoming a symbol of Detroit's economic collapse. Today, portions are being redeveloped, but vast sections remain abandoned, a reminder of how quickly industrial might can crumble. Studebaker Plant, South Bend, Indiana. The former Studebaker manufacturing complex in South Bend tells the story of America's oldest automaker and its struggle to survive in a changing industry. Founded in 1852 as a wagon manufacturer, Studebaker transitioned to automobiles but ultimately couldn't compete with Detroit's Big Three. The South Bend plant was massive, covering over 55 acres and employing thousands of workers who built innovative vehicles like the Avanti and the compact Lark. Studebaker's engineering was often ahead of its time, featuring advanced suspension systems and aerodynamic designs that influenced the entire industry. The company's merger with Packard in 1954 was meant to save both brands, but ultimately hastened their demise. What's shocking about the abandoned Studebaker facilities is how quickly they deteriorated after production ended in 1963. The main assembly building, once bustling with activity, became a hollow shell within years. Equipment was sold off or scrapped, leaving enormous empty spaces that echoed with the ghosts of industrial activity. The administrative offices where engineers designed innovative vehicles were stripped bare and left to decay. The human impact was devastating for South Bend. Studebaker's closure eliminated thousands of well-paying jobs and triggered an economic decline that lasted for decades. Entire neighborhoods that depended on the plant experienced massive population loss as families moved away seeking work. The abandoned factory became a symbol of Rust Belt decline, showing how quickly a thriving industrial community could collapse when its economic foundation disappeared. American Motors Corporation Plant, Kenosha, Wisconsin. The former AMC plant in Kenosha represents the death of America's last independent automaker and the end of an era when smaller companies could compete with Detroit's giants. American Motors Corporation, formed from the merger of Nash and Hudson, built innovative vehicles like the Rambler, Javelin, and the revolutionary four-wheel drive Eagle. This facility was AMC's main production center, building millions of vehicles from the 1950s through the 1980s. The plant was known for innovation, producing America's first mass-market four-wheel drive passenger car and pioneering unibody construction techniques. AMC's engineers were forced to be creative with limited resources, often developing better solutions than their larger competitors. What makes the Kenosha abandonment particularly shocking is how suddenly it happened. When Chrysler purchased AMC in 1987, they were primarily interested in the Jeep brand and quickly shut down passenger car production. The massive facility, which had been profitable and productive just months earlier, was essentially abandoned overnight. Assembly lines that had run continuously for decades simply stopped, leaving equipment and partially completed vehicles in place. The economic devastation was immediate and severe. Kenosha lost thousands of manufacturing jobs in a matter of months, triggering a recession that lasted years. The abandoned plant became a symbol of corporate callousness. Chrysler had eliminated a profitable operation simply because they didn't want the competition. Today, portions of the site have been redeveloped, but the loss of AMC eliminated America's last chance for automotive independence from the Big Three. Nash Motors Plant, Racine, Wisconsin. The former Nash Motors facility in Racine tells the story of another independent automaker that couldn't survive the industry's consolidation. Nash was known for innovative engineering, including unit body construction, efficient engines, and the revolutionary weather-eye heating and ventilation system that became an industry standard. Built in the early 20th century, the Racine plant was Nash's engineering and manufacturing center, producing vehicles that were often more advanced than those from larger competitors. Nash pioneered many technologies that the Big Three later adopted, including seatbelts, air conditioning, and aerodynamic body designs. The company's engineering department was particularly innovative, developing efficient engines and lightweight construction techniques. The abandonment of the Nash plant reflects broader changes in the automotive industry. As production volumes increased and economies of scale became more important, smaller manufacturers like Nash couldn't compete effectively. The merger that created American Motors Corporation was an attempt to achieve sufficient scale, but it ultimately just delayed the inevitable. When production moved to other facilities, the Racine plant was left empty. What's shocking about the Nash ruins is how much engineering history was simply discarded. The facility contained decades of automotive innovation, including prototype vehicles, engineering drawings, and manufacturing equipment that represented millions of dollars in development costs. Much of this was simply scrapped or abandoned when the facility closed, representing a massive loss of automotive heritage and technical knowledge. Kaiser Fraser Plant, Willow Run, Michigan. The massive Willow Run facility represents one of the most dramatic transformations and ultimate failures in American automotive history. Originally built by Ford to produce B-24 bombers during World War II, the facility was converted for automobile production by Kaiser Fraser, an ambitious startup that aimed to challenge Detroit's established manufacturers. Willow Run was an engineering marvel when Ford built it for wartime production. The facility was over a mile long and could produce 1 bomber per hour at peak efficiency. After the war, Henry Kaiser and Joseph Fraser purchased the plant with dreams of revolutionizing automotive manufacturing using mass production techniques perfected during wartime. Kaiser-Fraser initially showed promise, producing innovative vehicles with advanced features like safety-padded dashboards and aerodynamic styling. The company's engineering was often ahead of its time, incorporating ideas that wouldn't become mainstream for decades. However, the enormous overhead costs of the Willow Run facility made profitable operation nearly impossible without massive production volumes. What makes the Willow Run abandonment so shocking is the scale of what was lost. When Kaiser-Fraser failed in the early 1950s, the massive facility, which had helped win World War II and briefly challenged Detroit's dominance, was essentially abandoned. The enormous assembly lines, sophisticated manufacturing equipment, and advanced engineering facilities were left to decay. Today, portions of the site have been demolished or repurposed, but the failure represents a massive waste of industrial capacity and engineering innovation. Hudson Motorcar Plant, Detroit, Michigan. The former Hudson Motorcar Company plant in Detroit represents the death of another innovative independent manufacturer that couldn't survive the industry's consolidation. Hudson was known for advanced engineering, including the famous step-down design that lowered the center of gravity and improved handling significantly. Hudson's Detroit facility was the birthplace of numerous automotive innovations, including the first mass-produced unibody construction and advanced suspension systems that influenced the entire industry. The company's engineering department was particularly creative, developing solutions that larger manufacturers later copied. Hudson's racing success, particularly in NASCAR's early years, demonstrated the effectiveness of their advanced designs. The abandonment of Hudson's plant following the merger that created American Motors Corporation was particularly tragic because the facility contained so much engineering expertise. Hudson's advanced unibody construction techniques were years ahead of competitors, and their suspension designs provided superior handling that wouldn't become common until decades later. When production consolidated to other facilities, much of this knowledge was simply lost. What's shocking about the Hudson ruins is how quickly advanced manufacturing capabilities were simply discarded. The facility that had produced some of America's most innovative automobiles was stripped and abandoned within years of the merger. Equipment worth millions of dollars was scrapped, and engineering knowledge accumulated over decades was lost forever. The abandonment represents not just economic loss, but the destruction of irreplaceable technical expertise. These abandoned automotive factories represent more than just empty buildings. They're monuments to lost dreams, failed ambitions, and the human cost of economic change. What's your most shocking discovery about abandoned automotive history? Drop a comment below and let me know which forgotten factory deserves more recognition. Thanks for watching.